y'all, Dixie here. A lot of people ask, do I need to train for a through hike of the AT? And the answer, like it is with so many other things, is it depends. I can't possibly know the current health conditions and physical shape of every person watching this video. So it's really something that you have to decide for yourself. Now, I will say that it doesn't really matter how healthy you are or in great physical shape you are. Nothing prepares you for the AT except for going on a through hike, putting weight on your back, and actually hiking a trail and up mountains every single day. But that doesn't mean that trying to get in the best shape you can before you start won't be beneficial, because I definitely think it would be. When I started the AT, I definitely was not in perfect physical shape and I didn't prepare for it at all. I met a lady out there that was 72 years old that was hiking with her daughter, and she was a regular backpacker but had never done anything like the AT. I also met a 10-year-old girl who was like running with a lot of energy, and I met a young lady who, when she started the trail, she weighed 230 pounds, and when I met her in Pennsylvania, she had already lost 50 pounds down to 180, and her goal was to lose 100 pounds throughout her trek. But if you do want to prepare for the trail before you go out there, I would try getting conditioned to carrying weight. So maybe start off day hiking or even walking around the block in your neighborhood, just wearing your pack. And if that's too much, start off with just walking, but then slowly build up the weight in your pack until you can carry your full load, and then maybe up your mileage. And obviously, the more time you spend doing this and building up, the easier the transition will be for you when you start your through hike. And it's always a good idea to go out on a weekend trip anyway to test out all of your gear and kind of do a shakedown hike. I've been told that kettlebell exercises and jumping rope can also help prepare you physically for the trail. I've also heard that Knees Over Toes Guy on YouTube is a good resource for strengthening joints like your knees and your ankles, and also for helping you become more flexible, which all sounds great for getting prepared for a through hike. But possibly more important than training before you go is listening to your body when you get out on the trail. And if you aren't planning to do any physical preparation before you get out there, or really even if you are, it's not a bad idea to start the trail a little bit earlier than you think you need to, so that way you're in a mental place where you've allowed yourself extra time to slowly build up the miles. A lot of people get out there and they want to bust out the gate and go 20 miles per day because they've done the math and they've got to get to Katahdin. But if you start off doing way more than your body can handle, you're going to end up injured and possibly ending your through hike really early. I've seen a lot of people go home because of injuries I feel like could have been prevented from just listening to their body. Now, you may see people out there that are able to do double the miles you are starting out, and that might make you feel a little bit antsy, but that's where the saying hike your own hike really comes into play, because you have to do what works for you and your body. And I promise you, if you start slow and you just let the trail do that training process, before you know it, those miles are gonna go up and you'll find yourself on Mount Katahdin or Springer Mountain. But the bottom line is, nothing will prepare you for the AT like hiking the AT itself. Now let's talk about mental preparation and the mental aspect of hiking itself all the way up until you come home. But to start with, when you've decided I'm going to through hike the Appalachian Trail, I think one of the best things that you can do after you've told yourself is to start telling everybody else. Call your mom, call your friends, your family, your coworkers, unless you don't need your boss to know yet. But start putting it out there, social media, whatever you want to do to let people know. And the reason that I say to do that is because, one, then you've kind of spoken it into existence. You have made the statement, and maybe you'll actually start believing yourself that you are going to through hike the AT. And two, it holds you accountable, because now all these other people know that this is your goal, and once you've told people you're going to do something, then obviously you have to do it. But I mean, they'll probably check in with you. Hey, how's the planning for that weird woods thing that you said you were going to do? Are you still doing that? So it'll kind of at least put you under some pressure because you said you were going to do it. Also, I really think that it's best to tell friends and family as soon as you can, because it allows them to kind of go from that shock phase to the more supportive phase. And building a good support team before you leave home is really important. It's not a necessity, but having a support team, I think, definitely helps, because when you're down in the dumps and you need to call somebody at home, you know, you want them to be looking at this in a positive way, not, yeah, I told you so, that you shouldn't have gone out there mindset. Now, you should be warned that when you go telling people this, don't be surprised if everybody's not just super excited for you right out of the gate. And sometimes people closest to us will really even get upset or get angry that you're going to go do something like this, because they probably haven't done as much research into it as you have. So you already know some of the risks involved with through hiking. But all they're gonna think is, my loved one is fixing to go out into the woods and sleep with strangers and possibly get killed by some wildlife. And then now they're talking about hitchhiking. What? So just take it slow and easy with them and give them a chance to come around. But know that if somebody reacts in a negative way, it's probably from a place of concern and love. But the bottom line is, the only opinion that truly matters comes from the person who's looking back at you in the mirror. Completing a through hike of the AT is much more of a mental feat than a physical one. Now, don't get me wrong, the trail will beat the crap out of you physically, but your mind is going to be the thing that tempts you to go home. Some of the situations where I not necessarily felt tempted to go home, but where I was most miserable and I really questioned, why am I doing this, was when there was rain. And I don't mean just rain for a day, but like the third day of rain, and now it's getting really frigid. The cold rain was like kryptonite. But I kept in mind, it can't rain every day until I finish the trail. So eventually the sun is going to come out again, and the cold will slowly fade, and summertime will be here, and before I know it, I'll be sweating my butt off. And I was. So in those moments, especially that you can't control, like bad weather, just know that it's not going to stay the same forever, and it will change. And if you have to get off trail for a couple of zeros to get out of some of the weather and dry out, then do that. Do what you need to mentally get through, but don't succumb to just being frustrated at things that you can't change, like the weather. Another time that was very mentally challenging for me is when I started getting close to the finish line, like within a few hundred miles, maybe even 500 miles or so. And I just had this anxiety about falling down and breaking my leg, or something happening and me having to get off trail after I had come that far. And then I told myself, like, are you serious? Knock it off. Stop freaking out over that, because you've made it this far. And if you have to crawl to Katahdin now, then that's what you're going to do. But I will say I added a lot of mental stress on myself with different situations. I had to leave and go home for a graduation, and I had an emergency with one of my dogs that I had to go home for and come back, and then a bout of plantar fasciitis, and I took my fair share of zeros having a good time with my tramily. So all of those things made me much later in Maine than I would have liked to have been. So that's why I kind of stress, start a little bit earlier than you think you need to if you can, because that gives you more time and less stress as far as that end deadline of when they'll close Katahdin. And finally, I noticed a lot of mental anguish, if you will, when I spent several days alone. And this wasn't very common at the beginning. It was more towards the end, because the bubble had already passed me and they were done with the trail, and I was still lingering, trying to get there. And I kind of started to feel like Tom Hanks in Castaway, where I was like talking to my trekking pole or or animals out there or whatever. So you're probably going to have your own little quirky thoughts or things that really frustrate you, and you'll throw a toddler fit in the middle of the trail. Those things are kind of normal. In those moments, there were some different things that I would try to tell myself that kind of helped. So maybe they'll help you too. First, you're going to hear it a lot. No rain, no pain, no Maine. And that's very straightforward. Like, you got to suffer if you want the prize. Also, a bad day of hiking is always better than a good day at work. I mean, sure, sometimes when I was freezing cold in the rain, I'd be like, oh, but my office would be climate controlled and I'd be warm right now. But then I'd really imagine being back at my office on one of the better days, and I'd be like, no, you know, I think I'd rather stick through the rain for another couple of days because the sun's going to shine and it's going to be okay. Keep your head up, and not just in the, you know, keep your head up, keep your spirits up. I mean, that too, but look around and enjoy the view. Now, you'll probably trip on a root or a rock whenever you decide to look up and enjoy the view, because that's normally how it goes, but there is beautiful country around you that you can only see if you walk to it and you're there. So make sure, even if you're having a bad day, that you try to take in something good around you. And when it would rain, I would notice that the forest seemed to be more green and vibrant. And also the little red F's would come out on trail. So it was exciting to get to see those. So try to hone in on the positive aspects to even the negative situations. I would also tell myself, all you have to do is put one foot in front of the other. And there were times where I was so exhausted or sore or just mentally drained, and I would look down at my feet and watch one foot going in front of the other, and I'd say, one foot in front of the other is all you have to do to get to Katahdin, and it works. And then I'd remind myself that Grandma Gatewood hiked the AT more than one time with less comforts than what I had, so what business did I have complaining about my situation? And finally, I promised myself before I ever left to start the trail that I would not quit on a bad day. Anybody can quit on a bad day. Anybody can go, I'm tired of getting rained on, I'm tired of being cold, this sucks. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't quit at all. If you get out there and you really feel like through hiking is not your thing, that's okay. That's perfectly acceptable. I don't expect you to suffer through months of something that you're really not enjoying. But make sure that when you make that decision, you're sitting on a mountaintop summit with a beautiful view, and you're looking out at the birds flying and the butterflies fluttering, and you're like, this sucks, I want to go home. If you can do that, then it's probably time for you to go home. But what I told myself is if I couldn't do that, then I had to stay on trail. I've had a lot of people say to me, okay, but what if I don't finish? Okay, well, you started. A lot of people would never be in the woods for a weekend, let alone months at a time, and they certainly wouldn't spend time somewhere where they couldn't flush the toilet when they went to the bathroom. So the fact that you even had the desire to through hike, made plans to do something like that in your life, because it's very hard to set aside a 6-month period and tell everything else in life, you know, wait till I get back. But you were able to prioritize and to do that. So that's already very commendable, and the fact that you had the guts to get out there and take those first steps on the AT. So if you end up with some injury that knocks you off the trail, I mean, yes, you're definitely going to be upset, disappointed, but know that the trail is still going to be there. So if you decide to section hike the AT instead, that's fine. If you decide to come back and tackle a through hike another year, that's great. You were able to have the mental fortitude to make it happen the first time. So I definitely feel like you can make it happen a second time. And if you decide that you don't want to at all, that's fine too. But make sure you don't sell yourself short, and that you realize how far you came is way beyond what most people ever do in their entire lives. Unfortunately, the mental struggles of the trail don't necessarily stop when you're done. A lot of through hikers experience something we call post-trail depression once they get home. And you might be wondering, how could somebody who just completed possibly one of the most wonderful things they've ever done in life be depressed? But you have to keep in mind that hikers have one goal in mind for 6 months, and they have literally bled, sweat, and cried to reach that end point, worked for it every day, day in, day out, through miserable weather and bugs and all sorts of other struggles. And one day they finally reach that goal. And yes, it's exciting and fulfilling, but then you go back home. So you can kind of start to feel disconnected from friends and family at home, because you've had this epic change within you, and they've pretty much been doing the same thing since you left 6 months ago. So it can be very difficult to transition back to normal life at home. So let me suggest some things to you that might help with that transition. First, if you can, try not to finalize your end of trail plans before you ever leave to start it. I know it might seem like, well, I've got to get my transportation figured out. Like, I can't not know what I'm gonna do when I get there. But I promise you, throughout your hike, you're gonna start to relax and you're gonna be much better at rolling with the punches and going with the flow. And your end of trail self will probably appreciate that you didn't have the date of a plane ticket hanging over your head the whole time. Now, I understand some people will be forced to make those plans, but unless it's necessary for some reason, I would hold off. Even if you decide to rent a car and road trip back with people or whatever you feel like you need to do, take some time to decompress before you throw yourself right back into your old life. Keep in touch with your tramily once you get back home. At first, you might have some exciting things going on, catching up with old friends, but check on your tramily, see how they're doing, because chances are, if you're starting to feel a little down about missing the trail, they will be too. And they're the ones that trudge through everything with you, so they're the ones that can connect with you the most. And reminiscing together, in my experience, really helps. Another thing you can try to ease post-trail depression is stay connected with the trail community. And obviously that won't be out there through hiking, but joining a Facebook group, for example, for next year's class of through hikers and interacting with them, trying to help answer some questions they may have, can help you feel better. Or making videos and putting them out there about your hiking experience. Or maybe even doing some trail maintenance, whether that's on the AT itself or in your local area, because if it wasn't for trail maintainers, none of us would have the trails that we walk on. So giving back, I think, helps people feel good. Also, simplify life. When you get home from the trail, chances are you're gonna feel a little bit overwhelmed by all the stuff you have, unless of course you got rid of it before you went out there. But I came home and I thought, if everything that I need lives inside one backpack, then why in the world do I have so much junk in my house? And I started just cleaning stuff out and getting rid of things, taking stuff to the thrift store, and just trying to simplify the processes in my life too. Because on trail, it's very straightforward. You walk, you sleep, you eat, and every now and then you go and grocery shop. Now, I understand you can't have that exact life every day, but if you can eliminate some of that stuff that doesn't have to be in your life, especially things like energy suckers that aren't doing you any good. And finally, post-trail depression probably hit me the hardest when my year mark came around, and a lot of people were posting about getting out for their through hikes that year, whether it was people who were going to do the AT that hadn't done it before, or my friends who were able to do a through hike the next year and they were starting the Pacific Crest Trail or whatever. And man, I wanted to be starting a trail so badly. So I went out and I did trail magic, and I actually grouped up with some of my old tramily members, and we were able to put smiles on the faces of next year's class of AT hikers at a place where we had gotten some pretty epic trail magic. But just know that the post-trail depression will begin to fade over time. Of course, it's going to be different for different people, but eventually all of the good memories are going to stand out more so than missing the trail. But not all of the mental aspects of through hiking are bad. In fact, it has been shown that if you spend time in the outdoors, it can actually help with anxiety, depression, etc. But not only that, I saw some other things in myself when I got home. First, I was way more confident. I started my own little microgreens business when I got home from through hiking the AT, and it can be a little intimidating going into a chef's kitchen and trying to pitch them a product, but I thought, if I hiked the AT, then of course I can do this. And there were a lot of things that mentality rolled over onto. And I definitely began to appreciate the little things in life a lot more, like having a comfortable bed to sleep in, having a climate-controlled home, not caring if I had to be in the rain when I was walking from my truck to the grocery store because I didn't have to sleep in it that night. Also, I gained a lot of priceless memories, stories that hopefully I'll tell my grandchildren one day, and some lifetime friendships for sure. And finally, when I got back from the trail, as cheesy as it sounds, I had a restored faith in humanity. So many people had been kind to me along the trail, had helped me with rides, places to stay, food, just the camaraderie of the trail community. I had never experienced anything like it before. And Until you're out there and you see that, you might actually believe that life and humanity is like it's portrayed on social media, where people hate each other because of what box you check on a ballot for the presidential election. And that just wasn't realistic on trail. People were kind to one another without caring about religion, politics, background, etc. All right, y'all, well, that is all I have for you today on this topic. If you want to watch one big video with all of this information about the AT, but it's split up by timestamps, then you can click right here. Or if you want to watch my through hike of the AT, then you can check that out below. Thank y'all so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe before you go. If you've got any questions, feel free to drop those in the comments, and we will see y'all next time.